Hello mates, I'm Max from Bodyak Books and welcome to a new series on the channel called Bad Game Mechanics or Bad Game Design, whichever will work out better. This series will focus on specific elements of bad video game design, choices and mechanics that irritate me to no end in otherwise good games that I ordinarily enjoy. This is an experimental episode. You can expect every vid to be split into categories of review with timestamps for each. And after all, I don't want to just shit on video games. I want to give you mates context so you can learn to like or appreciate the things that make me like these games too. Today we'll take a look at Receiver 2, developed and released on April the 14th, 2020 by Wolfire games. Which means that, as of the time of recording, this game is already 6 years old and it will be able to attend elementary school. This vid will contain a brief overview of the game's lore, core loop, great mechanics, some Wolfire Games company slander at the end, and of course the crown jewel of the episode, bad mechanics and design. I know this game is a little bit niche, so I have to include those things in order to give you guys some more context. So, let's begin. Receiver 2 relights the candle that has slowly faded out with the relevance of its own predecessor, which was a 7-day FPS challenge jam project from 2012. That candle carries the scent of randomly generated dark environments, unpredictable enemy placement, the Matrix, and of course, gun porn. Well, not exactly gun porn, but one thing's for certain, Receiver 2 achieves staggeringly high levels of accurate gun modeling, which I'll talk about later. It does not glorify guns, but neither does it underplay or insult them in any way, which makes Receiver 2 a more grounded, sort of realistic firearm simulator than just a gun porn game. Alright, so Receiver 2 takes place in the same mysterious universe as its predecessor. After an event called the Mind Kill, which presumably has wiped out most of humanity on Earth, the remaining humans find themselves in a weird, dark, dreamlike, Matrix-type environment called Reality B, armed with a random handgun and a cassette player. They're constantly hunted by autonomous kill drones which were apparently dreamed into this reality by something called the Threat. In Reality B, death is merely a setback that keeps you from becoming awake, and most people find themselves dying over and over again. And before I get contradictions in the comments or on Steam, it's literally confirmed through in-game notes left by other humans, so don't at me or whatever. Now, there exists some mysterious organization that claims to exist in Reality A, which is, quote,
bathed in radiant light.
They communicate with humans in Reality B through pre-recorded cassettes, which were blank before the mind kill took place.
Novices often start with...
This organization dubs surviving humans receivers, roll credits, and claims to have a cure from the bad mental influence of the Threat. They very aptly define the Threat as just the media, but we have to assume that it's some malevolent organization that has always wanted to subdue and kill everyone on the planet, for some unspecified reason. And also for some reason, they aren't quite successful with receivers, considering that kill drones don't really permanently kill receivers. But what do we know about the Threat, right? Now, if the player is one of those receivers, the game retains its mechanics of listening to cassettes in order to advance, but instead of having you find 11 cassettes all at once, it splits your progression into so-called receiver ranks, with a requirement ranging between 3 and 5 cassettes necessary per rank to advance. Every rank represents a new level of so-called insight that your character has achieved. It's just one step closer to the surface of Reality B and to finally awakening. Every death, on the other hand, demotes you, pushing you deeper down towards baseline level. I guess the idea is that when you die, you lose mastery over your body and mind. Or something. Around Reality B, you'll come across notes written on diskettes. They are apparently left by other receivers and tell their stories and experiences, especially this story of Maggie, who calls herself the mongoose and represents a dumbass receiver who will never progress but will still keep performing crazy stunts and documenting them. Your character also keeps a personal diary that you can read in the menu. This is all optional lore fluff for lore lunatics and completionists to spend more time on this game than what is actually necessary. The world reveals that receivers are also capable of dreaming things into existence, like the organization and the threat. These things manifest primarily as balloons containing ammunition. You can pop them to get extra rounds. The organization's care packages are usually just ammo boxes you can find lying around, often next to tapes they leave for you.
Who the fuck would hide a receiver tape under a freaking turret?
The game becomes exceedingly more difficult and extraordinarily meta in the later levels. Supplies, tapes, and notes grow more scarce, and the threat's assets become more abundant. The player's goal is to basically become the best receiver there ever was and listen to them all. The tapes, I mean. To get back to what I said earlier, when I said that this game is gun porn, there was some merit to it. I mean, seriously, every firearm in the game has every single component modeled and simulated as a functioning part, as opposed to the original game's internal math. Any problem with a specific component will cause a consistent malfunction that you would expect to get in real life. You can't really break or damage guns beyond repair, but I guess that just removes further frustration from the game, which I'll get to later. This is hearsay, but this Steam user claims that once you no-clip out of the game world and go so far as to where the game starts suffering from floating point precision errors, guns literally stop working. Now that just tells me that Wolfire have somehow approximated real gun functionality, and it's just so awesome. Receiver 2 features the following malfunctions: failure to feed, failure to eject, aka stovepipe, and double feed. So far, I haven't been able to get guns to overheat, because there's just not enough bloody ammo in the game, but it doesn't look like they even can overheat, because they don't go red. Fixing malfunctions approximates real-life techniques, particularly the tap rack ready technique. Obviously, you do slightly different things for each malfunction. There's different inputs for checking a chamber, fully pulling the slide back, as well as locking the slide and even being able to load a round directly into the chamber. Now, can your game do that without automating the process? You can even tap the magazine on a pistol, which you probably should do every time you insert a mag to avoid a failure to feed, and you can decock almost every gun in the game. The magical procedure in the game is called tap rack bang, which I assume implies that you might jam during combat. But I think that anybody playing Receiver 2 will just fucking die if their gun jams when encountering a turret or a drone, and especially a fucking drone. I would just run the fuck away and then see what's wrong with my gun. The ballistics in this game are just top notch. You might not notice that different caliber bullets travel differently until you try long range shooting. You'll definitely see things such as bullet drop and aim spread with guns like the snub-nosed Colt Detective Special. Receiver 2 models bullet refraction, or whatever it's called when you try shooting through glass windows, and ricochet. Hitting targets with ricochet, in fact, can really feel both like a blessing from God and a vile punishment when you're on the receiving end. Pun intended. See this? Some players think that when you look into the mirror and you see a gun range silhouette, that is just a funny and silly little detail that exists in order to allow the devs to skimp out on player models. Now that's false. Unlike those people, I actually listen to the tapes that the game throws at me. One of them distinctly talks about mental conditioning of US soldiers post-World War II. In order to reduce their aversion to shooting people, the army would slowly introduce targets shaped like human silhouettes. And the tape also mentions that with sufficient training, you can stop seeing people entirely and start seeing silhouette targets everywhere.
even in the mirror.
Now, this to me is almost masterful environmental storytelling. The player's reflection implies that the character you play as is extremely capable with firearms and has been training for so long in their past life that this training is now ingrained into their subconscious, traveling with them to reality B, even if they don't really remember any of it. The audio in this game is nearly superb, and I say this as an amateur audio engineer. There's so many great sounds in the game, and the ambience is just something else. The ambience sounds seemingly normal, but there's always something off. There's been multiple occasions where I interpreted the creak of metal equipment as somebody walking above me or behind me, and sometimes ambient noise drowns out the noise made by various kill drones. At the same time, you can use the audio design to your advantage, to like pre-scout a room without exposing yourself. Flying drones produce a distinct noise with their rotors. Turrets produce an ambient hum and a mechanical whir whenever they move. There are stationary turrets and those that scan the environment around them, either periodically or constantly. The former will whir every few seconds as they change their viewing angle, while the latter will just whir perpetually. Whenever a turret spots you, it will take half a second to chamber the first round from its ammo box, and it's a very distinct loud noise that tells you you're about to get fucking turned into Swiss cheese if you don't act fast. There are even those trickster sleeping turrets that only activate when they sense motion in front of them. You can only really see their silhouette in the dark or the faint glow produced by their batteries. Both turrets and flying drones will be able to see you from further away if you shine your light on them. However, this mechanic actually makes kill drones spot you even if you aren't looking at them with your flashlight out, so it's generally best to just use your flashlight maybe 5% of your actual playtime. Unlike what the tapes tell you about awareness in the dark and PID. Fuck that, in reality B, everything is out to get you, mate. Now, a good mechanic is that if you don't see a kill drone but that kill drone sees you, your screen will light up yellow from the side you were spotted from. Check it out here. I can't see the turret, but the turret's light is so bright that it backlights my character's vision, telling me that, oops, I gotta back out of this room immediately. Now, turrets also have fully functioning guns with ammo boxes, chambers, and barrels. All of these things can be individually broken with your bullets, and that includes the vital components on each kill drone, like the camera, the motor, or the batteries. Or the rotors in the flying drones. So then, Receiver 2 is also partially technology porn, if you'll excuse my fucking language. And if you don't want to waste ammo, you can sneak out from behind the kill drone and hack it with your strong handgun master hands. Now basically, Receiver 2 is just brilliant at keeping you on your toes whenever you move throughout the world, and will have you stopping to look around and listen quite often. You'll learn that safe operation of guns is important, and you'll be loading rounds into your mags obsessively when out of combat. You can take injuries from the environment, when falling or when glass rains on you, or when you accidentally shoot yourself. However, non-fatal injuries will quickly be healed and your character will stand up and be walking and running in no time. Receiver 2 is as much a gun simulator as it is a stealth puzzle game. Every room is kind of a puzzle that you have to solve, and the game doesn't really even punish you for exploiting weird movement tech. And that's really cool, I think. Oh, where do I fucking start with this? I don't even really need to say anything to introduce this mechanic, I'll just show you. Now what the fuck was that, you may be asking? Why, you've just shot yourself. Yes, Receiver 2 has a negligent discharge system, known as the ND system. It's easily one of the most controversial and most frustrating fucking things in the entire game. The way it works is that every single time you holster or draw your gun, you have a certain chance of accidentally pulling the trigger and giving yourself a Glock leg. Sometimes the game will allow you to survive and will display a passive-aggressive hint about safe holstering or whatever, and sometimes it'll just decide, fuck you, you're dead, sissy. So how do you avoid Glock lagging yourself? Why, you have to hold the holster draw button, tilde or tab by default, instead of tapping it like a moron. Now, if you don't think that this is the most retarded shit ever, you're about to see why it is. Now, first of all, you're required to hold the button in order to not do something. In this case, if you want not to shoot yourself in the thigh, you have to hold tab instead of tapping it. This is a terrible game design choice because every single other action in the game requires a simple tap or a very short button hold. Safe holstering and drawing requires you to hold the button for approximately a second. A whole second. And if you let go a fraction of a second earlier, even if you've diligently kept track of your inputs, you will shoot yourself regardless. Not to mention the fact that returning players will find it extremely hard to get used to this feature because holstering and unholstering was just one fucking button press in the original game. Naysayers and Wolfire arse lickers will adamantly tell you, but you can engage the safety on semi-automatics and keep your revolver cylinders open before you holster. Alright, fair point on the safety mechanism. Counterpoint, Glock 17, which has no external safety you can flip. And second counterpoint, have you ever actually seen anybody in real life keep an open revolver in the holster? When you draw, you'll have a completely different input to ready your gun, which is R to close the cylinder, whereas V toggles safety on semi-auto pistols. This will fuck you even harder if you momentarily forget which way the cylinder spins, and when you pull the trigger, the hammer strikes a blocked chamber. Now, one option to deal with revolvers is to manually decock them. A decocked revolver is basically set to double action mode and obviously requires more force and thus a slightly longer LMB press to shoot. Decocked revolvers like the Smith & Wesson Model 10 and the Colt Detective Special are said to never ND, but at least in my case, they have went off on more than one occasion. So revolvers are never truly safe, unless you keep the cylinder open like a pervert. And on the other hand, there's just no fucking dealing with the Glock 17. The Glock 17 famously has no external safety mechanism, meaning that the only way to carry it safely is to empty the chamber. This is known as the Austrian carry method because the Austrian military keeps their pistols empty chambered, unlike Americans who prefer to have a round always chambered. The game even has a whole fucking tape dedicated to the Glock lag phenomenon, but it introduces two ideas that have no payoff in the game's world: internal safety and trigger discipline. Firstly, the Glock 17 has a complex internal safety mechanism. This is true. The trigger also requires significant intentional force on a pull in order to fire, which is difficult to do when the gun is snagged on your clothes or whatever. Secondly, the tapes mention that the so-called old CIA technique had operators put their finger on the trigger as they were unholstering, relying on external safety. Now, I don't know about you, but given the frequency at which NDs happen in Receiver 2, I have to ask, is our character so fucking retarded that they can't keep their finger off the trigger unconsciously? No, I mean seriously, in the last section I've established my reasoning on why I think that the player character is a firearms expert, at least handling wise. They can operate any handgun of any mass and size without fail. Obviously they know to keep their index finger off the fucking trigger as they're drawing their gun, right? Well, the tapes make very modern pop culture references at times, which tells me that the protagonist was definitely not trained using the old CIA techniques. So what's the reason? This Steam idiot and bootlicker tries to rail the point home that this represents you being an inexperienced receiver. Okay, sure, the player character is a bad receiver, but as I've demonstrated already, they are not a bad shooter. In fact, they're very good at it. Hell, it's most probably a he, given how well he handles the big Desert Eagle and the Colt single-action army. And to finish this mechanic off, it punishes not just careless players, it punishes players who are clearly very mindful of this specific mechanic, just because they didn't hold the tab button for long enough. And this is extremely easy to do. Most players like me are very anal about keeping their mags topped off to their full capacity and will constantly eject mags to fill them. And because you need both free hands in game to insert or eject rounds from mags, you have to put your gun away. So the process is you eject, holster, insert rounds, unholster, insert, tab mag, check chamber. As you can see, Holstering and drawing happens all the fucking time, and it's very fucking easy to hold the tab button for 0.2 seconds less than necessary, resulting in an ND. Surely the in-game character wouldn't be stupid enough not to train himself on this pattern to the point where he would keep his finger off the trigger, right? Duh, the trigger gets snagged on your equipment and clothing. Just shut the fuck up. Every single fucking gun featured in Receiver 2 has a heavy enough trigger that requires intentional force to cause a discharge. No amount of snagging will actually cause the gun to shoot unless your character applies an equivalent amount of force in the opposite direction. And you can't excuse this with the threat manipulates probability. Just sort of. This is not probability based in any reality. Now, what I think is this mechanic exists expressly so that players die more often and get kicked down levels, demoted as the game calls it, and have to replay everything all over again. You know why? Because Wolfire games realize that Receiver 2, with enough luck, can be beat in way under 2 hours even by a new player, and can thus be lawfully refunded. So this mechanic exists as a frustration tool that just slows down your progress. An anti-crutch, if you will. The demotion system should just be scrapped and redone. It works hand in hand with the ND system, as I've mentioned in the previous section, but it just exists to punish players and reinforce a roguelite playstyle. Now, the original Receiver was a roguelike because you had 1 life to get all 11 tapes. Receiver 2 is a roguelite because it simply kicks you down 1 level for every time you die. I could probably forgive it if there was more fucking content in this game. I'm sick and tired of listening to the same bloody tape over and over again because certain tapes are less likely to appear than others, and certain tapes are tied to whatever gun you spawn with, which is itself inconsistent. Moreover, when you hold L to reload or reshuffle the game world, it just fucking demotes you, or sometimes it even skips demotion and kicks you straight down to baseline level, without even informing you of it. I mean, sure, this input is never mentioned in the keybinds, but players of the original Receiver remember that you can hold L to restart if your conditions are unfavorable. Receiver 2 just tells you, fuck off, you moron, you don't want to make do with what you have, without actually informing you. At least show us a freaking demotion screen when we hold L. You ever thought of that? Right, you can avoid demotions by physically typing insight on your keyboard to advance 1 level. But this counts as a cheat in-game, and it will automatically disable achievements for your entire campaign until you get demoted back to baseline and thus restart. And I'm a guy who likes collecting achievements, even if I'm not a completionist. Surely I'm not the only one who doesn't want to cheat to progress more consistently and with less headache, right? Because deaths in Receiver 2 can really be the most arbitrary and nonsensical things ever. 1 fall will kill you, the other one wouldn't. You will magically slide off this edge but will keep walking atop that railing. 1 ND will give you a second chance, the other ND will kill you instantly. Just stop it, please. The demotion system seems good on paper, but as it is executed in-game, it reeks of a last-minute addition the devs made when they realized that their game can be speedrun without it in another 2 hours. AKA during the refund time frame, which is a theory that I will uphold as a cynic. This section may be really bad or not necessarily bad, it's just a section on a specific fuck you gun. Receiver 2 surprisingly features 2 fuck you guns, the Glock 17 for the semi-automatics and the Colt single-action army for the revolvers. The Glock 17 troubles have been explained earlier, but the Colt army is a different beast. First of all, it's a near complete shift from the guns you're more familiar with, the Colt Detective Special and the Smith & Wesson Model 10. So, what similarities do those 2 revolvers have? Well, they're both double-action, single-action revolvers, DA/SA, meaning that you can cock the hammer for a trigger-happy easy single-action pull, or decock it to get a more deliberate, slower double-action pull. They both have swing-out cylinders, which you can swing out by pressing E, and eject all rounds when you press V. You can hold G to catch unspent rounds as you're ejecting them. And then you can spam Z to fill up all empty and unblocked chambers with new rounds. You can spin the cylinder freely with the mouse wheel and then close it by pressing R. The only difference between the two guns is that Colt revolvers rotate the cylinders clockwise and others rotate counterclockwise, but that's not an issue most of the time, you get used to it. Now, the Colt single action army is the old ass man that comes in to ruin the new generation's party. This classic cowboy revolver can only be fired in single action, meaning you have to manually cock it before every fucking shot. You also can't just open the cylinder at any time, you have to half cock it. And to half cock it, you have to tease your F button instead of pressing it like you normally would. Moreover, you don't swing out the cylinder because it doesn't have a swing out cylinder, you open the loading gate on the side, which only ever exposes one chamber, whereby you manually eject every single spent casing, spin the cylinder one chamber, and repeat the process. One single benefit of this reload system is that, due to the position of the gate, you can instantly replace a round you've just fired with a new one, resulting in, I guess, marginally faster reloads, but even that just assumes that your confrontation takes one single shot from you. Because of the way controls work in Receiver 2, with most actions requiring just a single button press instead of a hold, it's physically impossible to decock the SAA from a half-cocked position. You invariably have to first fully cock it by holding F, then hold LMB, pulling the trigger, and then release F, fully decocking it. You can probably see the issues with this mechanic in general, but this is less obvious with other revolvers, which can only either be cocked or decocked, whereas the SAA has an intermediate state. Yes, I did have a few embarrassing negligent discharges with the SAA while I was trying to decock it safely, but thankfully I was holding it out instead of in my holster, so it didn't hurt me, but I still lost ammo, you know? Apparently this is part of a legit mechanic where you can cowboy rapid fire by holding LMB and jerking off the F key as you pull the hammer back over and over. I've never done it. Now, the Colt SAA is quite a powerful, beefy gun. It's a 45 Colt caliber. But that just makes lethal holster-on-holster in these happen more often than with other guns. And yes, I mean lethal ones. Also, if you've ever thought that decocking this beast will suddenly make it safe, you're wrong. And at this point in the video, gun history nerds are gonna be nodding smugly in the back, tipping their manure-covered cowboy hats. The single-action army is very prone to just discharging on its fucking own from physical shock when it's decocked. Apparently it's because the firing pin can rest directly on the live primer, and hard impact can drive it forward. In-game, this only really occurs if you drop from a height or ram into a glass window, but it's pretty freaking surprising when it does happen. Lethal if your gun is completely holstered though. The tapes teach you to, quote, cowboy load your SAA. Load 5 chambers and keep an empty chamber under the hammer. Or keep it half-cocked, because apparently it can't fire when half-cocked even with a live round, but honestly, I wouldn't trust this game not to kill you at any given opportunity. And anyway, this is a retarded old technique that limits your usability of the SAA to 5 out of 6 rounds, so even if you have no blocked chambers in your SAA when you spawn, you have to play as if you do. I mean, look, extra points on getting a ton of shit right on how the Peacemaker gun works, but goddamn, give us a more modern bloody gun that can't randomly fire when it's decocked. Especially if we've gone the entire game with revolvers that are safer when decocked. Like, I don't know, give us a Ruger Vaquero, which is another single-action revolver that, yes, also sees you reloading through a side-loading gate, but it's modern and it won't fire for no bloody reason while you're just walking around. The Colt SAA is permanently unlocked on the last stage of the game, the last rank, and if I'm not mistaken, it's actually forced on the last rank, unlike the rest of the game, and even though I realize it's a roguelike game, it's a really bad idea to add new unexplored mechanics to your fucking game towards the very end. You know what I mean? Oh, and also, this game is so fucking inconsistent that the decocked Colt SAA won't randomly discharge while you're sprinting. What? Okay, this one isn't too terrible, but it's just an inconsistency in turret ammo. So, when you destroy a turret, either by hacking it or by some other means, the turret will drop some ammo you can pick up. will always be the ammo that fits your current gun. Like, you got an M1911, the turret drops 45 ACPs. You got a Glock 17, the turret drops 9mm Parabellum. You got a Desert Eagle, the turret drops 50 Action Express, and so on. Now, the weird part is that turrets actually shoot rifle rounds. This is easily verifiable in normal gameplay, because shooting yourself in the thigh or foot with your handgun won't be lethal 100% of the time, unless you've got a deagle leg instead of a Glock leg, and God help you. But being shot by a turret in any perceived body part is always lethal. It just causes you to fall over and actually fade to black sooner or slower, depending on where it hit you. I can verify this inconsistency visually by shooting a turret in its ammo box. The box will shatter and drop belts of rifle rounds, seemingly 5.56 NATO. So like, turrets just magically spawn 1 to 3 rounds of the caliber you need at the moment whenever you destroy them. Or I don't know, your receiver character dreams this ammo into existence. Who knows? Yeah, this is a dessert type nitpick, and it is a nitpick because this is actually a neat mechanic for rewarding players with extra ammo when they hack turrets instead of shooting them, and it's pretty freaking useful on later stages of the game where receiver care packages become extra rare. Now, here is a solution to negligent discharges when drawing. How about you don't make them automatic? Leave the holster on holster mechanic tap only, but slow down the animation so it doesn't appear instant. Make sure that if the player presses L and B during that animation and the gun is pointing downwards, that the player will injure themselves. That just fucking makes sense, doesn't it? In fact, if the player suddenly finds themselves in a combat situation, this will feel more like the player's fault if they die to an ND or fail to unholster an aim in time. Now, it doesn't feel like the game is deliberately trying to kill you every turn. Oh, and keep the Colt SAA's random-ass discharge from physical shock feature. It kinda grew on me as comedic slapstick, especially in the very final level. Just remove the auto Glock leg mechanic and replace it with my suggestion. Alright, so fuck the demotion system as it is right now. We should expand content. First of all, you should not be demoted if kill drones manage to kill you. Your insight shouldn't be damaged just because the threat has one-upped you in some circumstance. I mean, a receiver is still not superhuman even in Reality B. You can have the highest concentration and mind-body coordination and still be overwhelmed by 32 flying drones. Second of all, demotions should only happen on deaths directly caused by your own actions. These would count falling from great heights, or falling off the map, Glock-legging yourself, standing under falling glass and letting it cut you, dying to your own ricochet or shot debris, or allowing the threat to cause your character to succeed in committing suicide when under the influence of the voice. You know what I'm talking about, those depressing tapes that you can only escape if you unload your gun as your character is fighting the urge to off himself. Basically, any death that counts as you committing suicide by any means is cause for demotion. In order to make the game more difficult, however, you have to split each receiver rank into sections, around 3 or 4 each. Being killed by kill drones won't ever demote you, it will just push you back to the beginning of a rank. Thus, each rank will feel like it has actual progression and a unique roguelike feel, because every rank introduces slightly different gameplay elements. Furthermore, this will allow the game to naturally feed the player all the different kinds of tapes it has per rank. I do realize I already said that tapes often repeat, but you could remedy that by either recording even more tapes or letting certain ones play more often. So like, in order to complete the baseline rank, you have to listen to all baseline tapes across 3 or 4 stages. It seems pretty reasonable to me, is it not? Wolfire Games is a company that seems to follow in the footsteps of Valve in terms of delivering content, but even compared to fucking Valve, their development is glacial. They were formerly founded in 2008, I think, but the lead devs worked on a few games before that, particularly in 2005, so I think it's reasonable to say that Wolfire is technically over 20 years old now. And within those 20 to 25 years, they've released some 4 games, technically 5, but the 5th one doesn't really count for reasons I'll outline a bit later. If you go to wolfire.com, not wolfiregames.com, mind you, that just leads you to some weird-ass Chinese hosting website, you'll find a page titled Independent Video Games. Yay, indie crap. And what do they have on their front page? Receiver 2, the thing they made 6 years ago and have barely updated since with anything meaningful because they delivered a finished product at the time. You scroll down a bit lower and see, at Wolfire Games, our mission is to push the video game industry forward by challenging conventional wisdom, sharing what we learn, and exploring the positive effects that games can have on the world. Let me translate that into layman's terms. We're an indie game studio. This is literally all this means. It's just pseudo-corporate bullshit speak for, we're indie, buy our games. What games are they advertising on the games page? Well, they're basically two sets of original game plus sequel. That's Lugaru HD, which itself is a 2010 remake of 2005's Lugaru the Rabbit's Foot, and its 2017 sequel Overgrowth, and the 2012 game Receiver alongside 2020's Receiver 2. Now, funny story, I actually bought Overgrowth on sale and got Receiver for absolutely free, which was a promo those blokes were doing around 2018, 2019, I don't remember. There's something missing though. Of course, they made another game in 2021, it's called Low Light Combat, and it's a free multiplayer shooter. Looks exciting, doesn't it? Well, it's actually just a fucking Instagib arena shooter, where the main gimmick is that you shoot light to actually be able to see enemies and expose yourself. It just kind of feels like an underpolished project for some game jam with those generic sci-fi assets and one single gimmick that marginally sets it apart from other Instagib shooters. I mean, watching Germa and Stir play Rats 1v1 Instagib is more fun than this. Low Light Combat is nowhere to be found on the Wolfire website until you check the news section, and sure enough, there's one fucking article announcing its release. Yay for indie trash, huh? It's almost like they're ashamed, or at least not too terribly proud of it, so they have to hide it. And despite their bloke David Rosen being in some cuck legal battle with Valve since 2021, they still fucking released the game on Steam. I mean, I have no other comments than LMAO. As of the time of me writing this, it has 0 current players, 0 in a 24-hour peak, and has an all-time peak of a whopping 142 players. What did all you flashy advertising go, Rosen? I guess you can download Low Light Combat to play with your buddies during a drunken LAN party or something. Charts indicate that every month 2 or 3 players come online, so you might find company from international bastards. Wolfire didn't give 2 shits about adding modding to Receiver 2, despite the fact that they worked really hard on making a modding framework for the so-called low-effort original and also for Overgrowth. They even open-sourced Overgrowth in 2022. Now, that just tells me that they've kinda stopped caring entirely. For your reference, there's 2 story modes in Overgrowth. There's the Lugaru story remake and the actual sequel story. But the sequel story is so fucking forgettable that I only remember cats appearing there for the first time and not much else. It's not a terrible game either. It's good, it's just lacking. It kind of feels like the guys at Wolfire added a bunch of content that's never used in the official levels or campaigns with the express purpose of allowing the community to make modded campaigns. So like, they basically said, fuck it, the community will fix it. And even when people found ways to mod Receiver 2 with Pepinx plugins, because it's a Unity game, Wolfire devs did play some of those mods, but still didn't consider adding official modding support. This, coupled with the fact that Receiver 2 is severely, and this is an understatement, lacking in mods compared to its predecessor, kind of signals a specific trend for Wolfire. The final news post on the website is from March 18th, 2022, and it's a fucking Receiver V10 update where they added modifiers to the gameplay. No other blog post since. According to some online hearsay, their Discord server has also been a fucking desert for the past couple of years. Now, I can't verify this, as I'm banned on both accounts. I joined back around 2020 or 2021 to check it out. This visit of mine coincided with the LGBT/minority pandemic on social media of those years, and this was quite clearly reflected on Wolfire's server. Their Discord community manager at the time, which is an amazing job description by the way, was very heavily pushing those gay-ass LGBTQIA plus BIPOC themed Wolfire merch. I don't exactly remember what the interaction was, because I was like 14 or 15, but I basically tried in the nicest way possible to inquire how exactly is this relevant to games actually made by Wolfire, and if the indie studio isn't just pandering to get some more money. That resulted in me getting a swift ban, on both of my accounts actually, probably because it was an IP ban or something. I have no idea if that bitch was demoted or fired since then, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't care, like, ever. But yeah, again, according to online hearsay, they've forgotten about their server too. And a complete lack of updates or any signs of life anywhere tells me of a very distinct possibility. That Receiver 2 in 2020 was Wolfire's zenith, and they hit their sunset around 2022. What can I say? No regrets.
No regrets, Mr. Freeman.
Oh yeah, one more thing. They are responsible for 4 more irrelevant games that only get a passing notice on their website. GL Fighters from 2001, Black Shades from 2002, Lightning's Shadow from 2003, an iPhone port of Black Shades 2009 that doesn't work anymore, and Desperate Gods from 2012, which is a fucking board game. They're so old that some of their linked videos don't even work anymore. And despite actually not being marketed under Wolfire Games, the 3 lead devs made something called Wet Robot Dreams in 2020, which is a fucking weird-ass game for the global game jam. That one is on itch.io. I don't recommend it. You can download those older games off of their website, I guess. They're free games after all. On second thought, don't play something that's actually worth your time.